The Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic will come to order. I want to welcome everyone. So one doctor who was bedside during the pandemic is Dr. Patrick Whelan. Dr. Whelan is a pediatric rheumatologist and an expert in molecular biology and immunology. Now, Dr. Whelan is a co-authored a paper which studied COVID-19 vaccine trial data and found excess risk of certain serious adverse events. Dr. Whelan also submitted a VAERS report for a young child who experienced a cardiac event after a second COVID vaccination. Sadly, a week later, that young man, that boy, died. Dr. Whelan tried to update the report. He discovered that the VAERS system is not set up to acknowledge updates such as this. VAERS still lists the outcome as cardiac arrest. I now recognize Dr. Whelan to give an opening statement.
My thanks to Dr. Wenstrup and Dr. Ruiz and all the members of the subcommittee for inviting me today to contribute to your deliberations on our vaccine safety systems. Allow me to make clear that I am speaking in my own capacity as a physician and researcher and not on behalf of any of the institutions with which I have been affiliated. I completed a Ph.D. in microbiology and immunology and had the privilege as a young man to care for Dr. Jonas Salk when he was a patient toward the end of his life. My day job is as a rheumatologist in Los Angeles, and as Dr. Wenstrup mentioned, I've been lecturing for the past 13 years in virology at the University of Southern California, and I've also had the privilege of being affiliated for nearly 30 years with Harvard Medical School in Boston, and I still teach a Harvard Extension course, undergraduate course in the spring. During the pandemic, I cared for innumerable pediatric and adult COVID patients, and I hold the CDC and the FDA in the highest regard. In November 2020, I chaired a study group for the American College of Rheumatology that was focused on COVID vasculitis, and it was attended virtually by nearly 1,000 rheumatologists. I appreciated that day that the mRNA vaccines then under development were novel in a way that was not widely appreciated. They encode the very protein that itself is causing the respiratory failure in those who were most severely affected by the disease. This is in contrast to the other vaccines that we depend on, which are either attenuated live virus vaccines like measles, mumps, rubella, non-pathogenic component vaccines like the hepatitis B virus, or inactivated toxins like tetanus toxin. In December 2020, on the eve of the first advisory committee hearing, to consider approval of the Pfizer vaccine, I wrote a letter to the FDA pointing out a new study that found enduring myocarditis in 2/3 of healthy young people who had been infected with COVID. I urged the committee then to specifically assess the effects of vaccination on the heart and suggested that although everyone wanted to quickly bring the pandemic to an end, it would be worse if we failed to anticipate long-lasting side effects of these new vaccines. I never heard back from anyone at the FDA, but no vaccine or other drug is perfect, and we shouldn't have been surprised when a few months later reports emerged about young people presenting in emergency rooms with elevated heart enzymes following vaccination. I subsequently joined a group of epidemiologists who analyzed the data that had been collected by Pfizer and Moderna in their randomized controlled trials prior to the emergency use authorizations, and we attempted to calculate the precise incidence for serious adverse events, or SAEs, in adults who received these experimental vaccines. We discovered that in the Pfizer trial, there was one additional serious adverse event for every 556 people vaccinated, or about 1,800 for every million. Yet the regulators at that time conveyed the impression that there were no major safety concerns. Our peer-reviewed study was published in the journal Vaccine in 2022. At a personal level, as Dr. Wenstrup mentioned at the beginning, I took care of a young boy who suffered a cardiac arrest in our emergency room shortly after receiving his second COVID vaccination. I filed a VAERS report at the time, and I felt it was my civic duty. I had filed other VAERS reports previously, but when the patient died a week later, I tried to update the report, and the system is not set up to do that, which led me to believe that the system underestimates the incidence of more severe outcomes, since many children and adults who are very sick and later die, their going to get a VAERS report filed initially. I don't know how many people are available at the FDA to follow up on the more than 1.7 million VAERS complication reports that have been filed the past 3 years. But I feel strongly that we must work proactively in our public health system, both to accurately identify the true risks of all medications, including vaccines, but also that we must have the courage to trust Americans with this information in a spirit of ethical, informed consent. Hopefully, we will ultimately know the true long-term risks and benefits of these vaccines that have been given now to nearly 3/4 of the world's population. Thank you again for the honor of meeting with you today.